Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, y'all are having a wonderful day today. So, when it comes down to it, I thought, of course, that I would give my little fight preview, my fight analyzation, and my short fight prediction of the fight that's going to be happening. The very interesting bout between that of solo Canelo Alvarez and that of the British contender, John Ryder. Now, when I say interesting bout, I'm not necessarily talking about from the perspective of I believe that this fight is going to be super close or that this is a 50-50 matchup or that this is the best possible opponent that Canelo Alvarez could have taken. But the reason why I say interesting is because of Canelo Alvarez's most recent performances, which have ranged from subpar, at least according to his standards in my view, compared to the Dimitri Bivol performance, to relatively good to great, but underwhelming to a degree in the Gennady Golovkin trilogy fight. We're going to truly see where Canelo Alvarez is at this point in time in his career. And I've had certain people, in my comment section when I've made recent videos about Canelo, they said, well, it's obvious that Canelo Alvarez has slipped as a fighter. It seems like you can't seem to admit it. Are you favoring Canelo Alvarez or, are you a Canelo Alvarez fan in any way? And no, I'm not. Of course, I enjoy watching Canelo because I think Canelo is an all-time great fighter. But like I said, I don't have favoritism or, bias or, well, I shouldn't say bias because we're all somewhat subconsciously going to have a little bit of bias within our minds, just depending on the generation or what fighters, what styles we prefer watching. We're always going to have a little bit of mental bias. It's impossible to have zero amount of bias. It's just not possible. But of course, in every single one of my analyzations, I try to give the most objective and logical approach as possible. And Canelo Alvarez, with his most recent fights, I can maybe let the performances slide if I see a very good performance here because, like I said, and I've been saying for years, that Canelo Alvarez's biggest challenges, in my view, were always going to be the two light heavyweights, Dimitri Bivol and Artur Beterbiev, because of their athleticism, because of their boxing IQ for what they can do in the ring, and on top of that, Canelo's not a natural light heavyweight. He's really not even a natural super middleweight. So the fact that Canelo once again got dominated by Dimitri Bivol or beat by him, especially with the fact, in my view, that he ran out of stamina past round four, it didn't really surprise me whatsoever. Dimitri Bivol is a great boxer, and that's why after that he got in the ring with Gilberto Soto Ramirez, pretty much a damn heavyweight in the ring with him on that night, and he pretty much dominated him. He pretty much beat him from pillar to post. But the real question is about Canelo Alvarez is that because it could be a multitude of things. Is it because he had a very tough fight against Dimitri Bivol? Maybe made some mistakes by gaining too much muscle mass. Did he lose to Dimitri Bivol, who's a very tough light heavyweight? A fight that it was always going to be, a very uphill battle for Canelo. And then in the rematch against Gennady Golovkin, or excuse me, the trilogy, the rubber match against Gennady Golovkin, was that also going to be always a little bit tough because Gennady gave him hell in the prior two fights? Because even Juan Manuel Marquez, I believe, at about 38 or 39 years old, now he was probably at a better point in his career than what Gennady Golovkin was at this point. But even certain fighters, even when they don't look to be the same, when it's a trilogy or maybe a fourth fight, it's always going to be a little bit testy because that fighter knows some of your secrets. They know you a little bit better than what most other fighters do inside the ring. So is it maybe possible that Canelo took a look at it and said, I'm coming off of a loss, and this is a fighter. Yes, he's older in Gennady Triple G Golovkin. He may be older. He may be a little bit of a shell of himself, but he still knows a lot of my secrets. He still knows how to get to me a little bit. I have to perform, very sharp in this fight, and I can't go for anything stupid. I can't go for broke because this guy can still punch. Is that possible? It is possible. It's also possible that maybe Canelo Alvarez, maybe he just couldn't find the same opportunities. Maybe he did try to get the stoppage. Maybe he just didn't think that he could get it, or maybe he couldn't get it because maybe he is dwindling as a fighter. I also think that it's possible that Canelo Alvarez possibly carried Gennady Golovkin a little bit in the fight to make the fight, end off, somewhat in a, bright, competitive approach, for that final fight. Just the way that they kind of set it up with the promotion. But who knows? That's just me pulling at straws there. I'm not necessarily sure. But either way, Canelo Alvarez, in my view, to show that he is potentially going to stay within that top five pound for pound or possibly regain that number one pound for pound spot, I'm going to have to see a very impressive performance here. Because in the Dimitri Bivol fight, in my view, his standards compared to his usual standards, he performed very poorly. And then in the Gennady Golovkin fight, I thought he dominated the fight, but of course, it would have also been nice, at least if you were a person expecting Canelo Alvarez to be more dominant in that fight and still possibly regaining his number one pound per pound spot, that you would have liked to have seen a stoppage. So this fight's going to be very interesting. And it still may not tell us a whole lot because, in my view, John Ryder is not really the greatest of opponents. I don't think that he's an A-grade fighter. Now, of course, he is coming off of a victory, I believe, over that of Danny Jacobs not too long ago. And I believe he also has a victory over Zach Parker. Two decent fighters. Danny Jacobs, though, however, and a lot of people, of course, believe that Danny Jacobs won that fight. I probably would have given it to Danny Jacobs as well. But in my view, Danny Jacobs did make it a little bit too competitive in that fight. So I can't really get after the judges for giving it to John Ryder, especially when I believe it was in Britain. Danny Jacobs was supposed to dominate that fight more. He didn't do it. So the consequences were that he ended up losing that fight. And to be quite honest with you, everything usually evens out. Because Danny Jacobs, to be quite honest with you, he probably should have just lost that Gabriel Rosado fight right before then. Danny Jacobs really hasn't been the same fighter, in my view, ever since that Canelo Alvarez fight. Ever since Canelo beat him, he really has not mentally been the same fighter, in my view. But it is what it is. And then, of course, he was able to get the victory over the undefeated British fighter, I believe, in Zach Parker, when eventually he had to stop because of a hand injury. Point is that John Ryder, he has improved a little bit as a fighter, but I don't by any means believe that he is an A-grade fighter. There would be a lot of people, including myself, that would debate that he's probably not even a B-level fighter. Maybe at this point in time, he might be a B to B-minus level fighter, but it's very obvious that this isn't really a fight where Canelo Alvarez should have a lot of issues. So if Canelo Alvarez is, in my view, going to get into that rematch with Dimitri Bivol, which I do believe he is going to get in the ring with, I think that was always Canelo Alvarez's plan. I've been saying that for months upon months, that in my view, Canelo was probably going to take a tune-up fight and then fight Dimitri Bivol in a long-awaited rematch. And, that's what I think we're pretty much getting. But the question will be is that how dominant will Canelo Alvarez be? Of course, we also know, I believe, that he's coming off of a hand surgery where I believe he had calluses on his wrist or something of the sort. So it's also going to be very interesting to see how Canelo Alvarez possibly recovers from that, if it was a huge factor in the first place. But like I said, it's going to be very interesting because Canelo Alvarez is going to have to show me supreme dominance in this fight. And I need to see, in my view, if he's going to have a chance against Dimitri Bivol in that rematch. He's going to have to knock out John Ryder within about 6 or 7 rounds at a minimum. At a maximum. He needs to knock him out within about 6 or 7 rounds. Because this is a fight to where it lasts the whole entire time. And if it's, 9 rounds to 3, 8 rounds to 4, something along those lines, even if it goes to unanimous decision, I'm not really going to be quite too comfortable with possibly predicting Canelo Alvarez to win that Dimitri Bivol rematch. I already predicted Dimitri Bivol to win the rematch a very long time ago. Now, if the best version of Canelo Alvarez shows up with some stamina, then he has a very decent chance to possibly pull off the upset in that rematch or to possibly pull off the victory. But if I see the Canelo Alvarez from that of the Gennady Golovkin trilogy, although he looked very good and, still very sharp, a better version of Canelo is going to have to show up for that Dimitri Bivol rematch, period. So like I said, we need to see a better version of him in this fight. And if we don't, then that will more than likely give us our clear answer. That it isn't just poor luck, that it isn't just the fact that he fought 2 tough fights or 2 fights that made him uncomfortable, that he is dwindling as a fighter. So it is going to be very interesting. As for the fight, how do I believe the fight is going to go down? I believe more than likely that Canelo Alvarez, that he is more than likely going to get the stoppage. I'm going to predict a stoppage in round 7 or round 6 because I'm not really sure what Canelo Alvarez is at this point in time in his career. Who knows? It could maybe even be a little bit later because once again, I believe Canelo Alvarez had a hand surgery not too long ago. Maybe it was a while ago. Maybe it was even before his last fight. I can't really remember. But anyway, when it comes down to it, once again, it's going to be a very big indicator. Canelo, in my view, is way more skilled than that of John Ryder. He's faster. More than likely, he's stronger. However, I will say this. John Ryder, in my view, in terms of an athlete, he is a little bit underrated. John Ryder is very decently strong. He's not a guy necessarily that, is a Canelo or a Gennady Golovkin per se. but he's very stocky. He might even be a little bit stockier than that of Canelo Alvarez. So once again, Canelo is going to have to watch out in this fight. He can't get hit with anything stupid. He does need to show his sharp ability in this fight, a high level of defense. But I do believe more than likely that Canelo Alvarez, that his plan of attack is more than likely to go to the body, rip him with uppercuts and hooks to the body, and kind of get him really upside, upside the head a little bit later on once he starts off with an early body attack. And then eventually, I believe John Ryder is going to get stopped in the fight. Once again, I'm going to predict around round 6 or round 7. So we'll see what ends up happening in this fight. As for John Ryder, I don't think that he necessarily is the worst boxer in the world. I just don't think that he's an elite boxer. But like I said, he actually does pack a little bit of a punch. I don't see him necessarily knocking out Canelo Alvarez with one good shot. Because like I said, I don't think he's a Gennady Golovkin type of puncher necessarily. But, once again, he's a stocky dude. He's a guy that might pack a little bit more of a wallop than what you once think. So Canelo will have to be careful with that. He's also not the worst counter puncher if he's able to push you back, or even sometimes on the inside. He has a good little sharp left hand. I believe sometimes a good overhand as well, or a good left hook because he's a southpaw. So Canelo will have to watch out for that. He cannot land in anything stupid in this fight, so he's going to have to watch out for that. But as for John Ryder, how do I believe that he could potentially give Canelo Alvarez trouble or possibly win the fight? In my view, you're going to have to make him the most uncomfortable that you possibly can. Try to back Canelo Alvarez up, try to go to the body early, stick that lead hand in his face, try to rip, that left hand to the body, or maybe early body shots later on, maybe see if you can, kind of get those stamina issues that Canelo Alvarez had in the Dimitri Bivol fight and also in other earlier fights in his career. Maybe see if you can go to his body if that affects him. His hand still may be potentially recovering, so try to mix it up with him. Try to make it very uncomfortable for him. I still don't know if that's going to work, but that would pretty much be my advice to John Ryder, because I don't think that he can outbox Canelo Alvarez in the middle of the ring. The only chance that John Ryder really has to win this fight, in my view, is if he tries to bully Canelo Alvarez or make him very, very vastly uncomfortable, especially taking advantage of the possibility that Canelo Alvarez might be wondering a little bit mentally where he's at this point in time in his career. He might be letting, some of the other outside voices get in about him possibly decreasing as a fighter. And on top of that, once again, we don't know where his hand is at. We don't know possibly, how injured it actually was, or if it was, maybe even a bigger factor. So like I said, we'll see what ends up happening in that fight. We'll see. But I do expect Canelo Alvarez to be sharp for a Canelo Alvarez performance, at least in hopes of seeing a great Canelo versus Dimitri Bivol rematch. I would like to see Canelo Alvarez get a knockout, probably within about 4 or 5 rounds. But like I said, I don't really know where Canelo Alvarez is right now. So let's see what happens. But anyways, my prediction is that Canelo more than likely is going to get the fight. Probably within about 6 or 7 rounds, I predict a stoppage. But, we'll see what ends up happening. Because once again, this is going to be a great revealer about where Canelo Alvarez is at this point in time in his career. So I do believe that Canelo will be going to the body very early on. And then eventually I believe he's going to rip that right hand up to the head, that right cross, as well as certain hooks. And I believe that he's going to be starting off with a decent body attack. As for John Ryder, he is going to have to try and really mix it up with Canelo and push him back and bully him. Do I believe that he's going to be able to do that for the whole entire fight? No, probably not. And that's why I predict him to eventually get stopped somewhere around 6 or 7 if Canelo is still a little bit off or if he truly is dwindling as a fighter. So let's see what happens. But anyways, that's really about it for today. Thank you so much for watching. I do have Canelo Alvarez by stoppage in this fight. We're going to see what happens. And then, of course, after that, if Canelo Alvarez decides, which I believe more than likely that he will, more than likely the Dimitri Bivol rematch is going to come. So we'll see what happens. But anyways, that's pretty much about it for today. Thank you so much for watching. I'll talk to you all later.